Hello, my name is Castro, and this is my strength and conditioning video project number 2. To start off our workout, we are going to be warming up with 5 minutes on the Stairmaster. I have it at about a level 7, and we are going to be doing this for 5 minutes. Starting off our warm-up here, we just want to get the body nice and warm and ready for activity. You don't want this to be too challenging. You want it to be enough to get you warm and actually get you a little sweating, but nothing crazy that's going to tire you out and not allow you to even move on to the next exercise. Speaking of getting warm, I want to take this time to talk about our ideology when it comes to warming up. We're going to be using the ramp protocol, with the first stage here being R, which is going to be raise. Now, by raise, we're going to talk about raising our core body temperature, raising our heart rate, raising our breathing rate to get our body ready for exercise. In my opinion, this is likely the most important part of your warm-up. So even if you don't have time to do much, you have to take at least a couple minutes to just get your body ready to perform the activity. Now, with raising your body temperature and your heart rate, this gets your body physically ready to start working out. It gets the blood pumping to your muscles and away from your organs, and it also gets you in the right mindset to start working out. And what we are choosing to get the job done is some type of low to moderate, but low moderate intensity exercise to keep going for about 3 to 5-ish minutes. We're using the Stairmaster, but you can choose any kind of low intensity exercise. You could do a treadmill walk, you could do some battle ropes, you could just take a jog, or even just a walk around the complex or a track if that's available to you. Just something that's going to enable you to start moving around and get the blood flowing in your body. Another aspect of warming up that is important is that beyond just getting you generally ready physically and mentally, it also gets your specific muscles, your skeletal muscles, it gets them ready to contract and produce force quicker. And now I'll be going over a rough outline of what to expect in this workout program. After our warm-up session is done, we're going to be going into 12 different exercises split into 6 modalities each. So each modality will have 2 exercises. And for each exercise, we will be doing 3 sets. One set will be your base set. One set will be a little easier in case you find the standard set a little too hard. And then the third set will be harder in case you found the first set too easy. And these 6 modalities that we will be doing are going to be the Olympic snatch, the Olympic clean, the Olympic jerk. We will be doing upper body plyometrics, trunk plyometrics, and lower body plyometrics. Again, each of these with 2 exercises, and each exercise getting 3 sets. I also want to get into why we aren't doing stretches for our warm-up. If you are unfamiliar, most people, when they think of warm-up, they think of doing some stretches, reaching for their toes, stretching out their quads. But research has found out that what we call static stretching, which is just what your traditional stretching is, stretching and holding that stretch position for 15 to 30 seconds, that is actually not conducive to a good warm-up, as it relaxes the muscle and does the opposite of what we want for them in this warm-up, which is to get them ready to fire. We will be doing another type of stretching called dynamic stretching, which involves moving the joints actively through a dynamic range of motion, but I'll save that for whenever we get there. Static stretching can be used for increased flexibility and joint mobilization, but you should save that for either its own separate session of stretching, or as I will demonstrate in this video, we will do it at the end of our workout. But you should never static stretch before a workout, as it will just completely erase all the work you've done to get your body and muscles ready to contract for the workout you're about to do. Now, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit, and I'm going to talk about the final phase of our ramp protocol, which is going to be P, for potentiation. What this basically just means is getting your muscles ready to perform the specific movement that you're going to do. For example, we're going to be doing some Olympic lifts and some plyometrics. So potentiating in this instance would be, for say the Olympic lifts, would be performing the Olympic lifts, but with either an empty bar or a very light load compared to what you are usually used to. This is just getting your mind and your muscles ready to perform that very specific action. You won't see me doing this in any of the video just to not waste time, but this is a very vital aspect to make sure that you're performing at your best during your workout. To dumb it down a little bit, potentiation basically just means performing some warm-up sets to get those very specific muscles ready. I recommend doing this before each exercise, at least 1 set. For your bigger movements, like say if we were doing a traditional weightlifting or strengthening program, like before your squats and your deadlifts and even your benches, I recommend taking time and really building up to those big weights that you would be lifting. But in this case, we won't need it that much. Now, after 5 minutes, we will be moving on to our next warm-up exercise. This is just going to be 1 minute of jogging in place. This is going to be just a little bit higher of an intensity because we're not going for long and slow like we were with the Stairmaster, but it's going to be a moderate jog, just keeping it in place. This is going to get your lower body kind of ready to start absorbing impact, which is going to be very needed for especially the lower body plyometrics, but even for the Olympic lifts. It's important that you get your lower body joints ready to start absorbing impact. Once again, we are going to keep this going for right around a minute or so, and then we will be moving on to our next exercise. Another reason that I like doing these directly after the Stairmaster is that if you've ever done the Stairmaster or even just climbed a long flight of stairs yourself in real life, you will know that it burns your quads. So doing this jog in place is a nice way to still keeping everything nice and warm and loose and getting it ready, but it takes a little bit of the work off of your quads and redistributes it better across your entire leg. And now we are going to be moving on to our next general warm-up exercise, which is just going to be just standing hops with 2 feet. Now, the reason I included this is, again, mainly to start getting our lower body ready to just absorbing the impacts, because we will be doing lower body plyometrics, but also to start getting our body ready to start producing the forces to have a successful workout with those plyometrics and those Olympic lifts. Now, 1 minute of just hopping is kind of a long time to just be hopping around, so feel free to switch it up a little bit. I recommend staying on both feet for now, but you can choose to do single leg. You can hop to the side. You can hop forward and backwards. It's just all about getting those lower body muscles and joints ready to start performing. As you can kind of see me doing here, I'm kind of rocking side to side, or sometimes I'll start doing some higher jumps, just producing a little bit more force and having to absorb more force with my ankles. I'll go back and forth. It's really just whatever you feel like. Now that we are done with our general warm-up, we're going to be moving into our dynamic stretch portion. To start off, we're going to be doing the inchworm. You just want a clear space in front of you, and what you're going to do is you're going to start standing up. You're going to bend over, put your hands on the ground, and you're going to walk your hands forward until you're in about a push-up position. And then once you're there, you will start moving your feet, and you will bring that towards you while trying to keep them as straight as possible up until you reach that kind of like V position, getting your feet as close to your hands as possible, and then you'll start moving your hands forward into that push-up position, then move your legs behind you, and just keep repeating that. We will be running this for about a minute. Now, I can't lie, the inchworm is kind of grueling, especially for it just being a warm-up exercise, but while I don't love doing it, I do think it helps prepare me for the workout ahead. Probably the best just behind doing the actual, like potentiating my muscles in that warm-up set. Now, moving on to our next dynamic exercise, we're going to have alternating side lunges. Now, with this, you're going to be really opening up your hip adductors, which are the muscles inside of your thigh that bring your legs, particularly your femur, brings it closer in line with the body. And once again, we will be running this warm-up exercise for right around a minute. Again, with the inchworm, you kind of just want a nice empty kind of straight piece of turf or land, and just any straight piece of like floor area that you can use. If you don't really have a lot of room to work, you could always just do it standing and just lunge to the right and then lunge to the left and then to the right and then to the left, just standing in place. But I like the rotational aspect of this. I also feel that stepping into the lunge, like I do with every time I rotate, I feel like that helps me get a better stretch. And it also helps me just so a little bit get a little bit better at my balance, which will be needed for our plyometrics later. And now moving on to our next exercise is going to be a standing lunge, or a marching lunge with a side bend or a side reach. Now what this is going to do is you're going to get into a lunge. You're going to take your step forward, take your lunge. It's up to you if you want to touch the ground or not. I like staying above the ground, like just having my knee oh so barely above the ground. I feel like it just forcing me to stay in that position allows me to work on my balance just a little bit better. And then with that side reach, you're really going to be stretching out that lats primarily, but you also be stretching out your tricep a little bit and overall a little bit of your back muscles, but it's really going to be a really nice big lat stretch. And just like everything else we've been doing so far, we will be running this for about a minute. Now, as you'll see what I'm doing here, I do like resting my hand either on my hip or on my front knee whenever I'm going for the bend. I just feel like, especially since we're losing that stability with having our knee on the ground, I like using my hand to stabilize myself in order to get a really good reach. Because if I wasn't stabilizing myself, I definitely would not be getting as good of a stretch. Now that we are done with our warm-up, we're going to be moving in to our real exercises. Here, I'll be demonstrating a quick demonstration of what the Olympic clean should look like. It's going to consist of 4 phases. It will be the initial pull, then it will be what we call the transition or the scoop, which is basically just going to be you scooping the bar with your knees like you see there, kind of. Then it will be the second pull, which will be pulling from about your knees to your hips. And then it will be the actual clean, which is going to be getting the bar up. Now, the clean is very technically involved, so I can't really do it justice in this video, so I recommend taking time to really get the mechanics of the clean down. Now, to start off, we're going to be doing our first set of a standard clean, and you'll notice here that what really makes a clean is that you will have your hands right about shoulder width, just kind of right outside of your hips, and then the catching position will be with the knees bent, and the bar will be in what we call a rack position, which is just going to be with it basically at your collarbone like you see here. Now, to be more specific, the first set that we're going to be doing is going to be from a low hang position. All this means is that you're going to start the movement somewhere below your kneecaps. The 3 main positions that you will do a snatch or a clean is going to be either a full clean or snatch, which we'll be demonstrating later, a low hang or a high hang. With what we did, the low hang here, again, it's just going to be right below the knees. The high hang is going to be somewhere above the knees, and then a full cleaner snatch is going to be just from the ground. Now, the reason I decided to do the low hang clean first was because I feel it's a nice middle ground between having the full clean where you're starting from the very bottom and the high hang where you're starting from basically the thighs. It still incorporates the majority of the range of motion, so you still have to be very technical on that. But at least in my opinion, I think the hardest part of the clean is getting from your first pull to that transition stage. I don't have much trouble with the actual scoop or transition. I might just be the way I'm built and how I clean. But I feel like getting from that pull to that transition is the hardest part. So taking that out and just making it doing the scoop and then second pull and then clean, I feel like it's a good middle ground in between. Now, moving on here, we're going to be having our second set. And with our second set, we're going to be doing a high hang. You'll see here it's going to be resting somewhere above my knees, and I'm going to be considering this the easier portion. Now, the reason I'm going to consider it the easier set is because really once you have a high hang, you're more or less through the really technical portions, which is going to be that first pull, transitioning into that scoop, and then getting in a good position to do that second pull. But when it's just that second pull, all you really have to worry about is just getting that triple extension and producing enough power and landing it correctly. While Olympic cleans in general are really good at obviously power and force production, I do feel like high hang cleans are the best for producing the highest amounts of force in the shortest amount of time, because you really only have from right above your knees to your hips to really produce all that power. So I think in terms of all of it, I think it's the best for generating the most amount of force in the quickest amount of time. You see me putting on pleats here to get ready for our last and harder variation, which is going to be the full clean. The reason I'm putting on plates is because I like doing the full clean from where a traditional clean position would be. Once you start moving up and you start putting weights on, it will be a little hard to try and redo your technique, because if you're doing it with no weights, you're going to be starting it from the floor, which is going to be much technically different as opposed to if you're starting from where the bar would be, which is about a solid inch or 2 above the ground when it has plates on. Now, the reason I'm calling this the harder variation is because you have the most technical aspects of it. You have the entire 4 stage. You have the first pull, the transition scoop, you have the second pull, and then you have the full clean at the end. And one point I want to make during this last set is that this entire program today is based around power, which is about 2 things: speed and force. It's about producing force as quickly as possible. It's not like, imagine a traditional really heavy squat or bench or deadlift. They're really slow movements for each rep. But with these, you want to be producing these fast. It's still a lot of power, it's a lot of weight, but you're doing these reps in a way that it allows you to do them quickly and really produce a lot of power. especially at that full clean part where it is just you producing a lot of force from your hips to get that bar up to your chest, or in case of a snatch, getting it above your head. Now, moving on to our next exercise of the Olympic clean modality is going to be clean grip power shrugs. Now, you heard me earlier talk about the triple extension, and I didn't really elaborate on it because this entire exercise is based on the triple extension. What the triple extension is going to be extension of 3 joints. It's going to be extension of the hips, extension of the knees, and extension of the ankle. Now, we're pretty much going to be doing the same set format as the original one. We're doing the high hang to low hang and the full clean, or I guess in this case, the full shrug. So since it's the same format, I want to take this time to talk about the triple extension and force production in the clean. This is really going to focus on actually producing the force it takes in order to get that weight from your hips to your rack position. Now, with that triple extension at the top, you're also going to be having a shrug. Now, the shrug is more going to come from the triple extension, and it's less going to come from you actually performing a shrug motion with your traps. The most of that, the bar coming up is going to be because of your triple extension, because that is where the force is coming from. Now, of course, with it being a shrug, you are going to be like shrugging it as you would traditionally do, but most of that is going to be coming from your triple extension from your lower body. Now, remember, this is just the shrug portion of the entire clean. So you want to keep your arms pretty straight. You don't want them coming up as if you actually are going to get your bar in the rack position. You want to keep your arms straight as you perform that shrug. And you should hear kind of a rattle from the bar and the weights moving around. Now, moving into our next set here, one thing I also want to really emphasize is starting each rep from a sort of dead stop. It's easier to do it when you do a full clean because the bar is just on the ground. It's obviously at a dead stop, but even when you're doing your high hang and your low hang, you want to make sure that you are starting each rep from a dead stop. You don't want to start using your momentum. This isn't CrossFit. This isn't anything where you're using momentum. You want to produce one singular, very strong bout of force and power production. You don't want to be just like kind of like lofting it back up and down, up and down, up and down. You want to do each rep, and you also want each rep to be meaningful and purposeful. You want the goal of one rep to be the most perfect rep that you can do. You want to get that triple extension. You want to get up on your toes. You want to get that shrug nice and good. You want to make sure that everything is good on each rep. You don't want to just be doing all 5 of them back to back to back to back to back. Another thing I want to talk about with the clean exercise in general, both regular cleans and the clean grip shrug, is the not just the hand placement, but the grip. You're going to want to have a double overhand grip, and you're going to have a full grip, which means you're going to have your thumb wrapped around the bar. You don't want to have a thumbless grip where your thumb is going to be on the same side as your fingers. You want to have it wrapped around so that you have a full control of the bar. The false grip has a time and place for which we will be getting into later, but for now, you just want to keep that double overhand full grip. As you see here, I'm starting from the ground. I'm starting from a dead stop. And I'm not just letting it touch the ground. I'm putting it on the ground. My hands are resetting. I'm getting the grip again. I'm getting my form again. I'm getting my lower body set again. You'll see me kind of wiggle around and just get to a good place to actually be able to perform this set. And if you're doing a full working set with working weight, you could probably take even longer to fully readjust yourself. Now, we are done with the clean portion of the exercise, and we are moving on to the Olympic snatch version. Now, the mechanics of the snatch are going to be very similar to the clean. The main difference is going to be the end position, and it's going to be your hand grip. As you can see here, my hand grip is quite wide. It's going to be, you want it to be roughly double your shoulder length, which you can either measure out, or the easiest way is usually just having your hands pretty wide. You'll be able to feel it more whenever you actually get your bar above your head, because if you have your hands too close, it's going to be too strenuous on your arms. If you have your arms way too wide, your hands are basically just going to be slipping out from the bar. So once you get in that bottom position, you'll be able to feel a pretty good sense of where your hands should be. Usually for the majority of people, you'll have them somewhere around index to maybe middle fingers on the very outside rings. Or if you're a little short with shorter arms, maybe pinkies on the rings, but you still want to have your hands somewhere around those rings. It's a good reference point for your snatch grip. Now, one thing that you're going to notice as I start performing these snatches is that the bar is going overhead, and you are going to need a lot of shoulder mobility. Yep, just like that. But now, I will be honest, my hands should probably be wider, but seeing as I don't have any substantial load on the bar, I'm kind of able to kind of, I won't say muscle these up, but I'm able to just kind of like go through the motions and get it up pretty easily. But if you have a actual significant load on there, you want your hands wider. And you're going to want to probably, in general, work on your shoulder mobility, external and internal rotation, but especially beforehand, you're going to make sure that everything is loose and everything is working properly in your shoulders. We started with a low hang snatch, and then here in a second, we are going to be transitioning into a high hang snatch. It's the same theory of why we are choosing it for the easier, the harder, and the standard for the cleans as well as the snatch. So if we take a second to talk about grip again, I feel that snatch, at least for me personally, is an instance where I am more likely to use the false grip. I don't know, you may be able to see it here in my reps, but I feel like it allows me to get a wider grip on the bar without having any excessive pulling or straining on my hands and forearms. Also with these, as opposed to cleans, where the cleans you're catching it in a rack position with your hands sort of not in it, it's more of your collarbone supporting it and your shoulders, not so much your hands. With snatches, I think you should take a much longer time getting your body used to not only the shoulder movement and the shoulder mobility required to perform this, but also getting your hands and your wrists ready to absorb all that impact. There's still ways that you can really use your functional stabilizers in your hands and like your ligaments in your hand and your bones to take most of the weight. But especially when you're starting out, you're probably just going to be holding it in your hand as opposed to letting it rest in your hand. And the impact of it falling into your hand, that's going to create a lot of wear and tear. So just make sure that you have an adequate amount of time to really get your hands and your wrists ready to absorbing all that impact. Another thing you want to make sure of is your catching position. You don't want to be pressing the weight up at all. You want to go for your power stroke. You want to get that triple extension, and then you want to dip real low and catch the bar, rotating your arms into that position above your head. You want to catch it in that low position. You don't want to have to catch it a little bit and like a half squat with your arms half bent and then press it up. You want to catch it at a point where your arms are fully extended, and then once you catch it and stabilize, you just stand up with it. You don't have to press your arms at all in this. I will say you should probably be catching it a little bit lower than I am here. But again, this is more or less just a demonstration using very sub-maximal weight for me, even compared to my level of technique with this workout. So just whenever you are actually performing it and you start performing close to maximal loads, make sure that you're actually catching it low so that you're able to catch it with your arms extended and then squat it up or stand back up with it. Now, moving on, we're going to be doing, similar to our last modality, we're going to be doing snatch grip power shrugs. So pretty much the same thing, just combining the two. It's going to be your snatch grip, about double shoulder length, hands somewhere around the snatch rings that most barbells should have, and then trying to get that good triple extension. Now I want to take a little bit of time to talk about how to program these exercises. As I talked about before, everything before this point has been power exercises. And so when you're incorporating them into your workout, you're going to want to do them very first. And you're really only going to want to do 3 to 5 reps during each set, and like 1 to 3 sets per exercise. These are really taxing, and so you don't want to fatigue your body too much. You also want to be sure that you're getting proper rest in between each of your sets. It's usually recommended to get about 3 to 5 minutes in between sets, but really I recommend just whatever you need to recover to a point that your breathing is normal and that you can perform the next set at your best capacity. These are also exercises that you are going to have to do at very high intensities. It's not like hypertrophy training or muscular endurance training where you can be around the 80, 70, even 60 or lower percent intensity of your 1 rep max. For this and strength training are very similar, where you have to be around 90 to 95% of your 1 rep max doing your sets at that intensity in order to see any real progress in your power. When it comes to frequency, it's always good to follow the rule of giving your muscles about 1 to 2 to 3 days, full days, to fully recover. But in the instance of power training, especially if you're new to power training, it's good to do these specific exercises just once, maybe twice a week. Once you become at least an intermediate level lifter, if this is your priority, doing Olympic or power types of lifts, you can start incorporating them up to 3 to 4 times a week. But unless you start becoming an elite level athlete where you are starting to enter competitions or you hold yourself to an elite level standard, it's probably best to stick around 2 to 3, maybe 4 times per week if you're going to be doing mainly power types of training sessions. It's also important to keep in mind that your recovery is not just about how your muscles are feeling, how sore you are. It's also about how much fatigue you accumulate, because these are like we discussed earlier, these are very high intensity exercises. And if you're doing that a lot of times per week, you're going to start accumulating a lot of fatigue, especially around your central nervous system, and your entire body is going to start becoming more tired and more worn down. So it's important that you pay attention to your body and what it's telling you, and to take a longer break if you really need to from these power exercises, because they take a very long toll on your body. And ending off our snatch modality, as you can see here, is going to be our snatch grip power shrugs. Now again, as always, you're going to want to get down low, close to how it would be as if you're doing a regular snatch, and you want to get up, you want to get that nice triple extension coming up on your toes from the power that you are generating with your legs. Now, moving on to our next modality, we're going to be having the Olympic jerk. Now, you'll usually see this combined with the Olympic clean into the clean and jerk, which is what you'll see if you watch the Olympics or any kind of actual like weightlifting competitions. This is what you'll see. You'll see these two exercises combined. But usually whenever it comes to training, we will train these separately. To start off, we're going to be doing a push jerk. Now, what makes a jerk separate from a press is your ending position. With a press, you're going to end with your legs locked out, and it's mainly going to be an upper body movement. But with our push jerk, you're going to see me here. I'm going to dip down, and I'm going to press it, and I'm going to catch it low. I'm going to start pressing it with my arms, but then I'm going to dip back under it, and then I'm going to squat back up with it. That's what makes a jerk a jerk. Starting off with our standard set is going to be the standard push jerk. To set this up, you're going to be standing in a normal standing military press form with hands right around your shoulders and feet shoulder width apart. You're going to do a push, just the jerk. You're going to dip down. You're going to start squatting it back up. You're going to press the weight and you're going to dip back under it, but you're going to be keeping your feet in the same position. It's okay if you do a little sort of jump or baby hop when you bring your heels back down. But the point of the push jerk is that you're going to be having your feet in the same position and you're going to end in that squat position. Now, what you'll see me start demonstrating here is going to be a harder variation, which is going to be the split jerk. And it's kind of hard to see with my feet, but you'll see one foot go forward and one foot go back. This is just another variation. I am considering it to be the harder variation because there's actual movement in your feet and it's a little harder to keep balance. But people do find it, once you master it, easier to get more weight up and then back up from that bottom position of the jerk. This is the type of variation for the jerk that you'll see most often, especially at higher level competitions, with a few exceptions from, I believe, mainly the Chinese team. They tend to favor the push jerk, but majority of other teams, majority of people that are in the intermediate to elite intermediate group, they are going to prefer the split jerk. Now, when you start loading some real weight on the bar, usually you won't see people doing what I'm doing, which is just bring it up from the ground and racking it on my shoulders. Usually what you'll see people do is you will either have it up on the racks on a power rack, like the one behind me. They would have it set up like that as if it were a squat or something. Or at gyms that are more catered to Olympic styles of lifting, they will have blocks, which is just an easier way because it's easier to change the height on them. And moving on to our final variation is going to be just a very similar to the first one. It's going to be our easy variation. It's going to be just a push jerk again, but it's going to be with a deeper squat. So what we're trying to emphasize here is really getting under the bar, and you're going to have to use more of your leg drive in order to get it up in the air high enough and for long enough in order to really get under that bar. And you're also going to have to work on moving quicker in order to make a actual difference in how low you are dropping. So you have to work on your quickness. You have to work on actually pressing it up. But overall, it is an easier exercise as you are using more of your leg drive and you're going to be more squatting it up. But there's different aspects to it that make it different and a little harder, but on the overall, it is the easier variation, getting under it more. Now, moving on, we're going to be performing the push press. Now, like I talked about earlier, the difference between the jerk and the press is that the press is going to end with locked out knees, as you will see here. It's going to be the same setup. You're going to be basically just a military press style, but you basically get to cheat with these. But you want to think about it less of cheating a military press and more of using your legs to be able to drive more weight above your head. This is gonna more closely work the actual muscles of your pressing as opposed to the jerk, which is more takes in account more of lower body. So this will help you develop some of that upper body strength that's going to be needed in case you find yourself in a position when you're actually performing the clean and jerk, where you have to really kind of, I won't say muscle it up, but use a little bit more of your upper body muscles than you would really want to while trying to get it up. You can see it here, but I want to address it. It's sort of been a running trend with these first three exercises, where the first exercise will be the complete exercise, the full clean, the full snatch, the full jerk. And then the second exercise is going to be some kind of accessory to assist you in that movement. Like we've been doing with this push press, it's not the actual exercise you would do, but it's still going to help you with the jerks. Now moving on to our second and harder variation is going to be a wide grip variation on this push press. Same setup, but our hands are going to be a little bit wider, nothing close to snatch grip or anything, but just a little extra out. This may be a little closer to where your hands would naturally land on a transition from getting the clean up to a press. The width of your grip is something that changes a lot just based off who you are and how you are built. But this could more closely replicate what it would actually be like to have to push up that weight in a jerk, which now if you wanted, you could also substitute this with any kind of, honestly, any kind of shoulder press. The point of this is mainly just building the muscles in your shoulders. But I like doing the push press as it is closer and more specific to the goal that we are trying to accomplish, which is the jerk and ultimately the clean and jerk. So feel free to maybe add in another shoulder press movement along with it, but I think including the jerk as well as just a regular push press is a good idea if you are trying to get better at the Olympic lifts. And as we move in here to our final variation, it is going to be the same, just push press, but it's going to be with a deeper squat. The point of doing these is similar to the reason that we did the final set on the push jerk, which is going to be just getting more leg drive out of this exercise, making it a little bit more leg focused. Since most of this entire 2 to 3 sets have been more upper body focused, this helps bring it all around and makes it closer to a jerk, but it's still very much, you're still focusing on the press. Now, obviously with big weight, you want to make sure you're getting a meaningful press out of it too. You can see that I'm not kind of just like jumping it up and then getting under it. I'm using my leg drive to press even more weight than before. All right, and moving on, we will be starting our next modality, which is going to be trunk plyometrics. Now, with plyometrics, there's going to be 3 phases. It's going to be about building power again. There's going to be the eccentric part where the muscle you're targeting is being stretched. There's going to be the amortization stage, which is just a transition phase between the eccentric and then the concentric phase, which is going to be your muscles that you're trying to work activating. Now, for this first exercises, it is going to be side throws. It is going to be mostly a oblique exercise with the rotation aspect of it that you see me here rotating to throw the ball into the wall. Now, one thing about plyometrics is that they are not a slow exercise. These are fast exercises. With my rotations, they're going to be fast rotations. We're taking advantage of what is called a stretch reflex in muscles, which is just something that happens in muscles just physically and biologically, where when they're stretched to a large point, they have an inclination to come back together very quickly. So you are capable of producing more force if you stretch out a muscle beforehand and then quickly contract it, which is what we are taking advantage of here. So if you have slow rotations, if that amortization phase is a little bit too long, you're gonna lose that stretch reflex. Now moving into our second and what I'm gonna consider the easier variation is gonna be kneeling side throws. So you're just gonna obviously you're gonna be kneeling and then you're gonna be throwing it into your open knee. So I'm throwing to the right, so my right knee will be down. Here I'm throwing to the left, so my left knee will be down. It's the same idea, but you are just a little bit more stable, and I feel you're able to produce better force when you're kneeling down. You could argue that standing you are able to get a fuller rotation both on the eccentric and the concentric, but it's just a variation, so obviously there are pros and cons to each variation that you use. And I like this variation because I think being on the ground is nice. It lets you be more stable and not have to worry about your balance. Less likely that you're going to drop the ball, like if you miss the catch. Now, seeing as these plyometric exercises are about producing power, the ideas of frequency and when to put these exercises into your program are going to be very similar as they are with the Olympic lifts. You're going to want to do them either very first or maybe even have them just on their own training block. And moving into our final variation, and the harder variation is going to be a step in side throw. As you can see here, so it's a side throw, but I'm taking a step back to start off the rep, And then from there, that's going to be my beginning. I'm going to take a step in, I'm going to throw it. I'm going to consider this my harder variation just because you're going to be producing more force. You have to take that step, so it's a little bit extra balance, but mainly it's because you're going to be producing a lot more force. So that eccentric coming back and then that amortization phase is going to be a little bit more strenuous. The concentric phase will be more or less the same, but you're still producing a lot more power. Now, moving on, we will have our next exercise. And for this second exercise of trunk rotations, it is going to be medicine ball twist. This first variation is going to be standing. The main resistance here is, as you'll see later, it'll start being gravity that's going to be pulling us down. But for this first one, it's just going to be the counter rotation of turning to the left, and then the momentum of us turning to the left is going to provide us the resistance of whenever we are trying to rotate to the right, and vice versa. Now, I'm doing these with the medicine ball, but you could do them with either a smaller medicine ball, or you could do them with maybe a kettlebell or just a weight plate. But I like the medicine ball because with it being bigger, especially you can really see it in the first set, it's harder to control it because it is just that much bigger. You don't have that much control of it in your hands. So I find the counter rotating to be much harder compared to maybe if you had like a small plate. And you'll see here in the next set why I like having the ball, specifically the big ball. Now moving on, we're just going to be having the seated twists. These are pretty much just Russian twists if you've ever heard of or done these. We're going to be trying to touch the ground. We're going to have our feet off the ground. Now, as I mentioned before, the main aspect of this exercise of the trunk rotation on the floor is mainly going to be counter rotating. It's not going to be actually getting the weight rotated. It's going to be fighting against the counter rotative force. That's what's really going to be working here. If you want something that's going to train regular rotation, you could do something like on a cable stack, like have cable set up a D handle and then twist. That would be better if you want to train the actual like straight rotation. But with this, it's going to be more counter rotation. And with a lot of trunk rotation exercises, that is the kind of stuff that you will be seeing. And now, starting off on our last set, we're going to be doing, it's going to be the same thing, just a trunk rotation with the medicine ball, but instead of the regular tap-off rotations, as you'll see here, I'm going to drop it off on the ground, rotate to the other side quickly, and then pick it back up. What I'm hoping to achieve with these is instead of just the counter-rotative force that we're getting, it's also going to take the regular rotational muscles on the opposite side that I'm picking up from to really get that ball up in the air in the first place. It's going to be less of the counter-rotation, as I stated, and more of actually getting that medicine ball up off of the ground. And moving in to our next modality will be the upper body plyometrics. First, we'll be doing a plyo push-up. Now, if these were being demonstrated by someone who's actually good at plyometrics, you'd be able to see them actually getting up off the ground more clearly. Sometimes they do a clap in front of or behind their body to really illustrate that they are getting up off the ground. But really the whole point of this is just to be pressing with enough force to get yourself off of the ground, come back down, absorb that impact on the eccentric, and then explode yourself back up. The main priority of this exercise isn't just getting yourself up off the ground, but it's also taking that downward impact from when you're coming down off of being in the air, taking it and then having a small amortization phase and getting up off the ground quickly. That's the main point of this. You may want your hands a little wider than you do in a standard push-up. I did notice my hands start drifting out, but I didn't know if that was because it was me trying to cheat by getting a shorter range of motion, or if it was me trying to overload more of my pec, put more of the emphasis on my pec as opposed to maybe my shoulders and my triceps. But either way, play around because this is a different exercise compared to a regular push-up. So just play around with your width. Maybe you'd want to, if you're going to be pushing yourself off the ground at that type of speed, maybe put your hands a little wider. I think it worked for me. Once I put my hands a little wider, I felt I was able to do it just a little bit better. Now, moving on, we're going to be having our second and easier variation. As you can see, our knees are going to be on the ground, and we'll still be doing plyo push-ups, but it will just be easier as we are taking some of the weight from our legs off of this. As you can see, even after performing that first set, I'm still able to really get off of the ground. If even with your knees on the ground, you're not able to do a good plyo push-up with a good three-phase plyometric and getting off the ground even a little bit, you could always try either increasing the incline by putting your hands on something, or you could do it against a wall, or you could do it against like a kitchen counter, something that will increase the incline, which will just have you pushing less of your weight due to gravity. Because really, when it comes to doing variations on push-ups, it's just about adjusting your body so that you are lifting more or less of your entire body weight while doing push-ups. And now as we move on to our last and a harder variation, you will see that I'm going to be putting my feet up. So it's going to be an elevated plyo push-up. You are going to see here that these are pretty hard because with my feet being up, it is going to place more of that weight of my body weight onto my hands instead of onto my feet. So that's going to make this exercise a lot harder by just having more weight that I need to push up. You see me really struggling right here. Moving on, we're going to be having wall throws. To start off, it's going to be standing wall throws. This is going to be in our other upper body plyometric. This is going to be working a lot of our lats and also mainly our lats, but it's also going to be working a little bit of our shoulders, particularly our rear delts and our triceps and pec muscles a little bit. And again, with these, you're going to be performing them with a medicine ball. I recommend trying to get a smaller medicine ball, not necessarily a lighter one, but the one I have now is really wide, so it's hard to get a really hard and fast throw on it with such a big ball. I think I'd be able to demonstrate these more effectively if I had a smaller ball, but this was all that I had available to me, so it's what I had to make work. With these, obviously as a plyometric, you're going to want to get that hard, fast, and explosive throw against the wall. Ideally, you'd want to be able to catch the ball, but it was a little hard in this situation. Now, moving on, we're going to be doing just ball slammed onto the ground. This will be a little bit easier because you don't really have to worry about catching the ball, and you get to just throw it full down. You get full range of motion up and full range of motion down. I'm going to consider this our easier set, just because that you have a little bit more freedom. You don't have to throw it against the wall. You don't have to try and catch it. You just get to slam that ball into the ground, and you are still very stable standing and throwing it just at your feet. And obviously, with the slams on the ground, you're going to be sure that you're not going to hit your feet or anyone's feet that are close to you, or maybe your phone or any. You want to make sure that your landing area for your ball is clear of anything that might be damaged. And moving on to our final and harder variation, we're going to be doing more wall throws, but it's going to be in a kneeling variation. It's going to be both knees are going to be on the ground. I find that this is the easier way to do it. You can try and do it one leg up, one leg down in a traditional kneeling position, but I find that this is just unnecessary. I think just kneeling on the ground is the way to go with these. It's going to be the same concept, throwing it as hard as you can against the wall, catching it, and doing it over and over again. And I feel that in the kneeling position, it's just a little bit easier to catch the ball coming back to you and to get a little bit better of a rebound. Now, moving on, we're going to be starting our lower body plyometrics, and starting off, we will be doing split squat jumps. You'll be getting to a split squat position, which is essentially just, in this case, a lunge, and you are going to be doing squat jumps from this position. We're going to be doing all our reps on one side and then switching to the other side. We will be doing about 8 reps per side. With these, I recommend bringing your feet in closer than you might originally think. Whenever you're first setting this up, you may be closer to a lunge position, but you want to be closer to a more traditional split squat position where your feet, where the toe of your back foot and the heel of your front foot are maybe only half a foot apart max. This will allow you to land better and keep your balance. I also want to talk about volume when it comes to plyometrics, more specifically lower body plyometrics. Volume is going to be counted as the number of landings or steps taken in a session, which essentially means most plyometrics involve jumping either up and down or side to side. So each rep is going to where you like jump off and then land on the ground. Every time your foot or a pair of feet touch the ground, that's going to be considered one touchdown. Typically at the beginner level, you don't want to exceed more than 60 to 80 touches per session. As you advance to intermediate, you can start bumping that up to 80 to 100, and then so on as you become more elite. Now, moving on to our second and harder set and variation, we're going to be doing still split squat jumps, but these are going to be cycled. So you'll jump on your right foot leading, then left foot leading, then right foot leading, and then left foot leading. Now, the cycling motion of this is going to make this quite a bit harder because instead of just keeping your balance on one side and then just kind of being able to keep that position and jump up and down, you have to be able to regain a new center of balance and positioning with each time that you switch your feet. Now, even though this is going to be a little bit harder because you are cycling, you still want to make sure that you're not just hopping up a little bit to be able to rotate between the positions. You want to be jumping up with your full power in order to really get the benefits of this plyometric exercise. If you're just kind of hopping up and down in order to switch your feet position, then you're not really going to be getting much out of this exercise except for maybe some aerobic endurance, which is not the point of what we're doing today. And we will now be moving into our final and easier set of the split squat jumps, which is going to be just normal squat jumps. If you find it harder to produce force with the offset legs, then this should be much harder. Now, since you're going to be having both legs in a more standard position, you should be getting all the way up with these jumps. And moving on to our second lower body plyometric exercise is going to be tuck jumps. These are going to be very similar to squat jumps, but when you come up off the ground, you want to bring your knees to your chest as high as you can. Another thing with these lower body plyometrics is that you need to be sure that you are handling them well, especially with your landing position, because this is your entire body weight, sometimes even more if you're progressing to adding a weight vest or plates, coming down on both of, if not just a single one of your legs. So you need to make sure that you're taking care of your knees, your ankles, and make sure that you're landing properly, not just landing however you want. It may work out whenever you're first starting, you're not getting that much volume or that many touches in a session, but as you keep going and your joints are going to start feeling it. So you want to take care of that ahead of time and to really get down the mechanics of landing. So I want to make sure that you are having proper rest. Typical guidelines suggest that you have a 1:5 or even 1:10 work to rest ratio. That means for every 1 second that you work out for your set, you should have upwards of 5 to 10 seconds of rest. And now moving on to our second and harder variation is going to be single leg tuck jumps. It's just as you would imagine, it's going to be tuck jumps. You're going to want to jump up as high as you can and bring that knee to your chest. As you can see, I am not doing these the best because these are a very difficult exercise. That is your entire body weight on one leg that you were trying to get up off the ground first of all, and then trying to get up high enough that you can bring your knee to your chest. And now, like I mentioned before, you want to be careful with these. You want to make sure that you are landing in a good position because, again, with all your weight being on one leg, if you have a bad takeoff and a bad landing, that could mean some bad things for your ankles and your knees. So just be sure that you're keeping all your jumps under control and that you're being mindful with how and where you are landing. Another thing about plyometrics in general, but more specifically lower body plyometrics, you want to make sure that you're taking into account that you are performing these at the same intensity as you would any strength or Olympic training session. So you want to make sure that you are planning these out so that you don't have a back-to-back leg session for Olympic lifts or for strength training, like with a heavy squat or deadlift day, and then the next day you're doing a bunch of lower body plyometrics. These are intense exercises. You need to plan around them so that you don't have an incredible amount of fatigue in both your lower body and just your nervous system as a whole. After plyometrics, your muscles need the same recovery time that they would as after any other kind of strength training with or resistance training. So they need roughly 2 to 3 full days to recovery depending on the intensity and what body part was worked out. For instance, if you do an upper body plyometric workout versus a lower body, that lower body one will probably take a little bit longer as compared to the upper body training session. And now moving into our final set of the day, it's going to be our easier set. We're going to be doing pike jumps. So these are going to be very similar to tuck jumps. You're going to be getting up and then moving your legs, but instead of bringing your knees to your chest, you're going to keep your legs straight as you can, and then just bring them forward in front of you. You're also going to want to make sure that you're bringing your torso forward. So the way that I best imagine this and cue myself for it is one, bringing my legs up, but then also trying to reach out and touch my toes or reach out in that direction. That ensures that I am flexing my trunk and getting my legs up as high as I can and performing the pike jump successfully. And now moving on to our final cool down session, we're going to be doing some static stretches. To start off, we are going to be doing some sit and reaches. You want to make sure that your legs are straight and just reaching, try and touch your toes. If you have really good flexibility, you can try and reach down lower on your foot or even start touching the ground. This is going to be stretching out your hamstrings and your calf muscles a little bit. And now, as we discussed earlier, this is the time after your workout to do these static stretches. You don't want to be doing them in the beginning. The reason for this is that as your muscles are hot and warm, this is a good time to really be able to elongate them as long as you can. Or of course, as I discussed earlier, you can choose to do that as its own separate stretching session, separate from before a workout. But it's up to you. I like doing my stretches after workout because I'm already in the gym, my muscles are warm, and I feel like I can get a better stretch on them. Now with stretches, it is recommended that you do a static stretch for a total of about a minute, but typically you would want to break that up into 15 to 30-second chunks. This allows you to get a good stretch on, but there is some research that suggests that holding it longer than 30 seconds could start to damage your muscles. But I decided to keep mine for a full minute because it has worked for me in the past, and I like the feeling of holding that long stretch. And then I typically do a small relaxation phase as like I'm stretching. I'll stretch, get a good stretch, hold it for a little while, then I'll come back, ease off of it, and then I'll ease back into the stretch again. And I feel that it allows me to get a better stretch on that subsequent stretch. Now, for most all of the static stretches that we're going to be doing in this cool down session, we'll be doing 2 rounds of them. So right now we're moving on to our second round of the sit and reach. And as we're talking about stretches, I want to talk about a different type of stretch that you may have heard of. This is going to be called ballistic stretches. This is the type of stretches that you might see if you were in team sports in like middle or high school. It's a type where you will reach down in a stretch, but you are bouncing at the end of it. So for example, in this sit and reach, instead of reaching for my toes and holding that position, I would constantly bounce back and forth between touching my toes and then easing off a little bit and then bounce back. This is not good because not only are you just not going to progress and get a proper stretch on those muscles, there's a possibility that you could actively hurt them with the stretch response that we talked about earlier, where the muscles have an inclination to contract right after being stretched. There is a possibility that you will stretch out a muscle that is in the middle of contracting, or vice versa, contract a muscle that is stretching, and this can lead to real damage. Now, moving on to our second stretch, we are going to be doing the cobra stretch. The way you're going to do this is just as you see here. You're going to be laying down prone, and you're going to be putting your hands a little bit out in front of you, and you're going to push them up, keeping your hips and legs on the ground, but really getting a good extension through your core. This is mainly going to be stretching out your rectus abdominis muscles. That's going to be the muscle that is the most obvious ab muscle. It's going to be your quote unquote six-pack muscle. Again, with these, we are going to be doing 2 rounds of 1 minute. And with this, if you have a really tight core and you are not able to fully get into this, or you have some limitations with a back extension, you could always do this by just doing the extension from your forearms, similar to a plank, and just pushing through your forearms. Now, so far, we have talked about 3 types of stretching. We've talked about the static stretching that we are doing now, dynamic stretching that we did before our workout, and the ballistic stretching that I warned you about to not do. Never do it. Now, I want to talk about a 4th type of stretching. This is called PNF stretching. Now, PNF stands for proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation. And all this means is that it is a type of stretch that has to be done with a partner. And what you'll do is that typically you'll have a partner in a position where they can contract the muscle that they're trying to stretch. And what you'll do is the partner will provide resistance for you to push against with whatever muscle you're trying to stretch. Typically, we'll hold that resistance for about 5 to 10 seconds, and then you relax. You'll typically do 2 to 3 rounds of these resistance movements, one in one direction, one working the agonist muscles and the other working the antagonist muscles. And then at that point, the muscles become a little desensitized to those end ranges of motions that you are having trouble reaching with your typical dynamic or mainly static stretches. And so this essentially takes off a small, I would call it a brain barrier, and allows you to reach deeper into your stretches. Now, these PNF stretches are typically considered to be the best types of stretches. They just allow you to get deeper into your stretches, get more flexibility out of your muscles. So if you have the ability to do so and a partner that's willing to do it with you, I do also highly recommend performing some PNF stretches. They can be performed typically in the same places as static stretches, which is going to be either at the end of a workout or as its own training session as a whole. And now, moving on to our next stretch, it is going to be a lunge with a side bend. This is mainly going to be stretching out your lats on the side that is up and being stretched. Typically, what I like to do with this is whatever leg is open. So if your right leg is up, left leg is down, I like to lean to the open side, as you can see here. Left leg is down, so I am bending to the left side. You could also choose to make this sort of a hip flexor stretch, but I prefer to just make this more specifically a lat stretch, because I feel if I try and make this a hip flexor stretch by getting in the best position I can and trying to push through my hips, I feel like the lateral flexion of my trunk kind of eliminates some of that hip flexor stretch. With this, you also want to make sure that your offhand, in this case, your left hand or my left hand, is stabilized, because you will see here my partner in a little while is going to try and lose her balance. But usually I either keep that offhand, I'm either going to put it behind my knee on my calf, because that's a good place for me to put it, or I'll just put it on the ground. That way you can get some real stretch out of it instead of just kind of laying or sitting there and kind of leaning over. If you have that support from your offhand, you can really get into that stretch and actually stretch out your lats. Now with these kneeling side bends, we're going to be doing these for 1 minute on each side, for 2 rounds on each side. So you'll be doing your left side, then your right side, then your left side, then your right side, each for 1 minute. Now typically, if you do start doing static stretches on a regular basis, you can start seeing real improvements at right around 6 weeks, and then from there you will just keep seeing drastic improvements. However, after a while, you may start to have the need to progress to different stretches in order to facilitate a greater stretch from those muscles. If you're going to be implementing static stretches as their own session as stretching, it's typically recommended that you do about 2 to 3 sessions per week. Any more and it's diminishing returns, so it's not worth it. But you want to keep it around that 2 to 3. If you're doing it after your workout, typically what I like to do is I usually stretch after most of my workouts, and I will just stretch whatever muscle group has been trained that day. So if I have any kind of upper body day, I will stretch out my pecs, my lats, some of my back, my shoulders, my arms. If I'm having a lower body day, obviously I'll do some lower body stretches. I like matching it up because obviously, since those are the muscles that are warm and hot and ready to be stretched, you want to stretch out those muscles. It would be a little counterintuitive to have an upper body day and then stretch out your lower body muscles. It would still be fine, but I like the feeling and I feel like it works better stretching out those warm muscles. You could also do separate sessions of stretching to do dynamic stretching, but the typical thought is that dynamic stretches are used for pre-workout because it is less about stretching out the individual muscles, and it's more about getting your body moving through ranges that it is soon going to be moving through with your workout. Now, if you maybe play a sport or are involved in something, or just want to be more mobile when it comes to being able to perform fluid motions and stretching out in those dynamic stretches, then obviously you can, but it is typically reserved just for that pre-workout in order to get the joint fluids flowing and getting your body used to moving in those planes of motion. Now with stretching, it is similar to many other things that you experience while in the fitness circle, which is, while it is pretty, you can improve on it very quickly. While you start stretching, within your first few weeks of stretching, you will start seeing improvements, not as big as improvements as you will see after a full cycle of about 6 to 8 weeks, but you will start seeing improvements very quickly. Just the stretches get easier, you're able to reach farther. You will see those improvements very quickly, but just as easily as they come, they will leave that quickly. If you are immobile, not just not stretching, but if, say, you are sick or hospitalized and you are in a position where you are not able to really move it through these ranges of motion, and you don't have anyone either passively stretching you or at least massaging those muscles to keep them mildly active, you will lose them pretty fast. So it's important to at least try and keep up with your stretching. If you're working out pretty regularly, it should be fine, but if you want to have an increased level of flexibility, you need to make sure that you are at least putting it in on a semi-regular basis of some sessions of static stretches or post-workout static stretches. Another thing to keep in mind when doing stretches, or really anything that is related to athletics or fitness, while stuff should be uncomfortable, because doing things that make you uncomfortable is what's going to cause you to progress, doing these stretches should not be painful. Sure, they can be uncomfortable to be in that position for so long. It can burn your muscles a little bit, that burning feeling, but in no way should your muscles be hurting. If they are hurting while they're being stretched, that could be a sign of a strain, which is something that will be aggravated even more if you are stretching. So if there is any real pain while you are doing static stretches, make sure that you take time off of the static stretches and relax for a little bit. Try and figure out what's going on with that muscles. Maybe it's just messing up for that one day, but you want to make sure that it's okay. And now moving into our next stretch. It's something that I've never really seen anybody else do, but I've done it and I've kind of just started incorporating it, especially before my leg days, because I enjoy doing it. But I kind of just will call it a kneeling lean back, where basically you would just get on both your knees and trying to keep your hips flexed, your hips extended. your hips extended up towards the sky. You will try and lean back and you will really feel a stretch on your quads. It's a little difficult trying to get the positioning, but it's a good way to get a stretch on the quads, especially if you are tired of doing the same 2 to 3 quad muscle stretches that everyone seems to do. Now, as you'll see here, one way in order to really get that stretch on that my partner is not demonstrating that well, respectfully, is you want to keep your legs straight. You'll see with mine, my legs are more or less directly, my calves are under my thighs, whereas to hers are a little more splayed out, which allows her to get in that position, but she's not really stretching out her quads. Now, granted, she is more flexible than me, but with me, whenever you keep your legs stacked on top of each other, you are going to feel a greater stretch on those quad muscles and really get something out of this exercise. However, you do want to make sure that you again are in a position where you are not feeling any pain. I was starting to feel a little pain on the dorsal aspect of my foot, which is something that doesn't happen super often, but because of that, I decided to just switch it up the next stretch. Which, speaking of our final stretch, we are going to be doing just a deep squat hold. Again, this is a staple in my leg workouts. I will also do this before my squat session, but I won't hold it for any extended period amount of time. I'll just get down there, make sure that I'm used to the feeling of being in a deep squat. Now, this is going to be mainly stretching out your adductors. Those are the muscles that are going to be on the inside of your thigh, and they're going to bring your thigh back into the midline of your body. With this, you want to make sure that you're in a real deep stretch, a deep squat with your heels planted on the ground. It doesn't mean anything if you're almost touching the ground with your butt. If your heels are off the ground, that's not going to get you any stretch. Now, just simply sitting in that deep squat position will give you a nice stretch. But what I also like to do is I like getting either my elbows, like you saw in the beginning, like clasping my hands in front of me, or like I'm doing now with my hands off to the side. In some way, I like pushing my knees out to get an even better stretch on my adductors. And with that concludes my strength and conditioning workout video. Thank you for watching. And Francisco or Dr. Dorgo, thank you for a great semester. Thank you.